I'm good. I'm tired. I was up watching the game last night. Well, the good news is I'm gonna be easy on you today, I think. Although this is my participation class, you guys are really good at participating. Last class, it was, people looked like they were pretending to be doing calculations, but then there was nobody raising their hand. So I'm guessing it was, I'll let somebody else do it today kind of thing. But I know this class is going to be different. So the only thing about that, well, if the moderator comes, I don't know if the moderator is coming or not. Okay, so you guys have your green badges?
Yeah.
Did everybody sign up? Because I think, did everybody sign up for class today? Right.
Yeah.
So was it hard? Because this is really good. This class is really getting me excited because everybody's participating and everybody wants to come in. That's awesome. All right, so, but it is a little tight. So we'll make sure we're all good. Awesome, fabulous. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we are going to start where we left off last class. As I was saying earlier, I stayed up to watch the game, so I'm a little tired. So I'm assuming from the last class that that is the case for a lot of you. So I will hopefully give you more problems, do a little review about what we did last class. And then, of course, as always, if there's something you're not sure that you're looking at, so please stop and ask questions about the numbers. There's a lot of numbers today, lots of calculations. So you want to have your calculators out. I don't have, it appears, a moderator today. So maybe chatting your answers is a good way. And then I can, kind of go back after the fact and take a look at that. All right, but if you still want to raise your hand and talk, I would still like you to have you raise your hand too, right? Because there's a lot of participation today too. All right, so we left off last class with our break-even graph, right? So we're talking about universal sports. Last class we talked about the new contribution formatted income statement, and we talked about break-even in terms of equations and formulas and income statements, right? So we're going to continue on with that. And then we left off with this cost volume profit graph. So this is just the visual of everything that we calculated last time. So remember, what we did calculate is that Universal Sports at break even is going to sell 40,000 jerseys, right? So that's their break even. That means that when they sell 40,000 units, that their net income is 0. And then we also calculated break even in terms of sales dollars. And we said when revenue comes in at 1.2 million, net income will be 0, right? So we went through all of these calculations, understanding that when we are talking about units, you're calculating that contribution margin per unit. And when we're talking about sales dollars, that's when you're looking for that ratio, right? Your contribution margin divided by sales, or as a percentage of sales. Okay, everybody's good, ready to move on here? Okay, so we are going to talk next about margin of safety. And we talked about this a little bit. We're moving on to, all right, it's really good to know break even if you are just starting off, right? You're a startup company. But as I said, Universal Sports has a net income of $84,000. So they're not at break even, but it's still a good idea to know break even, because if things start to go badly for them, margin of safety is going to tell them their cushion or their safety net. How much can your sales drop before you are no longer making a profit or you're hitting that break even point, right? So it's calculated as expected sales or actual or expected budgeted sales minus break even. So you're going to have to calculate break even. And I tell you actual or expected because a lot of times this is just a planning tool, right? Before I even start to sell jerseys this period, this is what I think I'm going to be selling compared to my break even, or it can be actual. It tells you how much your sales can drop or how much they can absorb before you hit that loss. And what I'm telling you here is the higher margin of safety, the less risky your company is, right? You have more of a cushion. I like to think about margin of safety as your safety net, right? It's your cushion. It represents the volume of sales that can be lost before the company begins to lose money, right? Before you drop below that break-even point. And margin of safety can be calculated in three ways: per unit, right? Or in terms of units, how many units can my sales drop before I am no longer making a profit? How much can my sales revenue drop before I am no longer making a profit? Or you can be calculating it as a percentage. And I'm going to show you, it's pretty much three ways of saying the exact same thing. All right, so I'm showing you here, and this is a good review. What we calculated was for Universal Sports, break even was 40,000 jerseys. And if you remember, they are currently selling 54. So their margin of safety or their safety net or cushion is 14,000 units. So if sales start to drop in terms of units, they can drop by 14,000 and then they are going to show a loss. Same thing with dollars. Here's the break even in terms of dollars. Here's where they stand right now. So if your sales revenue starts to go down, it can go down by $420,000 before you are no longer making any money. And showing as a percentage is just another way, like I said, of saying the same thing. You can either do it per unit or in dollars, you'll get the same amount. You are going to calculate your margin of safety and then divide by your current sales. So here, instead of saying my sales can drop by 14,000 units before I'm no longer making a profit, you're just saying my current sales can drop by 26% before I'm no longer making a profit, right? Because 14,000 is 26% of your current sales. And then same thing with dollars. Okay, everybody good? Vicki sells authentic Amish quilts on her website. Suppose Vicki expects to sell 1,000 quilts during the coming year. Her average selling price per quilt is $250, and her average cost per quilt is $150. Her fixed expenses total $50,000. Compute her margin of safety in units, in dollars, and as a percentage of expected sales. I was going to do this as a poll question, but last class, so many people looked like they were working so hard and nobody had the answer. So we're just going to do it on our own. But when you do have an answer, put your hand up. Don't be lazy. Kenzie,
I got 500.
500 quilts? Okay, did you do sales dollars?
No.
Yep, okay. Mark, do you have sales dollars?
Is it 50,000 sales dollars?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Pachi, did you want to do percentage? 50%. Okay. All right. Yes. So if you're going to answer this question, the first thing you're going to need to do if I ask you about margin of safety is to calculate break even, right? Because I'm giving you your current or projected sales and you need to compare that to break even. So if you're going to do break even, like I said, I think people were slow responding to this because you're going to have to go, you had to go back and look at for those equations or those formulas or figure out how to calculate break even. So in order to calculate break even here, remember the quickest way I think is going to be to do the formula fixed cost divided by contribution margin per unit if you're calculating break even in units, right? So your fixed costs are $50,000 and your contribution margin per unit is going to be 100 because it is your selling price of 250 minus your variable cost of 150. So Kenzie said 500 quilts is your break even. And since they are currently selling 1,000 quilts, then that is going to also be your margin of safety, right? So break even is 500 quilts. And then again, if you want to do this in terms of dollars, you could take the 500 quilts and multiply it by the selling price of 250. Right, so this is break even in terms of quilts and sales dollars. So this is a good review for you because you're going to be calculating break even again for me. Right, so once you have that break even, as I said, margin of safety is just how much your current sales can drop before you hit that mark. So if she's currently selling or projecting to sell 1,000 quilts, then your margin of safety is 500 units. If she's expecting sales to be 250, which was the 1,000 quilts at 250 a piece, and her break even is 125, then again, margin of safety is half of that, or 125. And in terms of percentage, you're going to take that margin of safety either for units or in total, divided by your actual or projected sales, and you can see that you're going to get 50%. All right, we good? Okay, margin of safety. All right, so what we're going to do next is target net operating income. So also, as I said, break even is a great thing to know, right? So it's good that Universal is above break even. They're currently selling 54,000 jerseys and they know their break even is 40, right? Their net operating income right now, I think, was $84,000. But remember, just because we're above break even doesn't mean our company is great. We are constantly trying to make improvements here. So what we're going to do is we're going to, instead of using the equations that we just learned or formulas to figure out how many units we need to break even, now we're going to use those same formulas to hit a target net operating income, right? So here, good to know 40,000 jerseys will cover my costs, but my net income right now is only $84,000 and I want it to be 102. How am I going to get there? Right, so here's what we're going to do. Assume that Universal Sports now wants to know how many shirts we need to sell or how much sales revenue we need to bring in if we hit that target in order to hit that target net operating income of 102. So now we're going forward. All right, so, and as I said, it's going to be the same equations, same formulas, so it'll be a nice little review to go back and look at those. The only difference is that instead of setting net income to 0, we're going to be setting our target net operating income to 102. So let's review those good old break-even equations that we did last class. So remember, when I am asking you how many units, remember you're calculating contribution margin per unit. When we're talking about dollars or sales revenue, we are calculating the contribution margin ratio. Still solving for units sold and sales revenue, sales dollars. The only difference is that when we use these equations for break even, we set this to 0, right? And then the only unknown was units sold or sales revenue. Same formula, except I'm plugging in $102,000 here. Okay. If you remember, contribution margin per unit per jersey was $6. We're solving for how many jerseys we have to sell. Fixed costs, if you remember, are still $240, but now net income is not 0. Net operating income is 102. So if you solve for X, which is units sold, you can see that they're going to have to up their volume from 54,000 up to 57,000. Krill.
Yeah, so a question. We're not able to use the shortcuts anymore, right? If you want to calculate the.
Do that next.
Oh.
I'm covering all my bases here, although most of you were using the shortcut, but you never know when you have that missing number. Sometimes it's just easier to use that algebraic format. Is everybody good with this? Remember, your ratio is 20% of sales. Again, solving for sales, you're going to get 1.71 million. Okay. All right. Now let's do this for Krill and everybody, because I think most people were using those shortcut formulas. So remember what we did last class. If I asked you break even in terms of units, you took your fixed cost and divided by contribution margin per unit. If I asked sales dollars, you took your fixed cost and you divided by the contribution margin ratio. We are going to adjust these shortcut formulas just a little bit. So instead of just looking at your total fixed cost as your numerator, you have to take your total fixed cost and add that target operating income. So your numerator is going to be fixed plus that 102. And again, if I'm asking units, you divide by contribution margin per unit. And if I'm asking dollars, you're going to divide by the contribution margin ratio. And also remember, you can memorize these. You're going to be using them and you probably will memorize them. But in order to, but what I prefer to do is not memorize and just kind of remind you how those formulas come about. Because when all else fails, you can work backwards in your income statement and answer the exact same question, right? So before at break even, your contribution margin was equal to your fixed cost because net income was 0, which is why we could just take fixed cost, because what we were trying to do is get to that total contribution margin, right? Contribution margin, and then we were looking at the per unit and the ratios. So now your contribution margin isn't equal to fixed. Working backwards, adding that target net income, you can see that you're looking at 342 as your margin. And again, if I'm looking at the income statement, I know these numbers are constant. And so $6 times what volume is going to get me to a total margin of 342, which is 57,000 jerseys. Or you could say, what's my sales revenue? Because at this volume here, remember, whatever contribution margin is, it's 20% of your sales. So divide by per unit if you're looking for unit, divide by ratio if you're looking for the dollars. But the idea is fixed cost plus that net operating income is getting you to that total contribution margin. Okay. Is everybody good? Okay, You might be throwing a little bit of a glitch or wrench in here. So now instead of saying, suppose that instead of operating income, right, projecting operating income of 102,000, suppose that I said universal managers want to know how many jerseys they have to sell in order to have a net income of $71,400, right? So net operating income is what we're always using, but remember, net operating income is not the same as net income. Net operating income is what you have before interest and tax, then you subtract out tax, and then you have your net income. Right, so if I'm giving you here net income, you know that you need to get to operating income. Right, so what I know here is that if the tax rate is 30%, you can see that what I said here is the net operating income or net income must be 70% of net operating income, right? So if you are going to take your operating income and subtract out your tax, which is 30% of that number, that means that net income must be 70% of that number, right? Operating income minus tax gives you net income. So your operating income must be 70%, or your net income must be 70% of your operating income. If I want operating income, then I'm going to solve for this. And you can see in order to get operating income, I would divide by 70%, divide both sides by 70%, and that leaves operating income on its own, and the answer would be 102, working backwards to that operating income. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Right, and then notice what I did to make this simpler, so you don't have to keep, think about this and think about what you're doing. The equation, what we're going to add to our formula is going to be your net income divided by 1 minus the tax rate. And that's exactly what we're doing right here. Right, so that's how you would solve for your operating income. So this is what your formula is going to look like, because contribution margin is equal to fixed cost plus target net operating income. Divide by contribution margin per unit. If I'm asking you units, how many jerseys you have to sell to hit that target net income, or divide by contribution margin ratio if I ask you sales dollars to get to that target net income. Everybody comfortable with this? Okay. Wimpy's hamburger stand sells one burger, the Super Tuesday burger, for $3. If total variable expenses are $1.75 per hamburger and monthly fixed expenses are $25,000, how many burgers would Wimpy have to sell each month to break even? So let's do a little review here. Brianna.
What, 20,000?
20,000 burgers. Sounds good to me, right? Fixed cost divided by contribution margin per unit. Fixed cost is 25. Contribution margin is per unit is going to be $1.25. Selling price minus variable cost. Okay. All right, so everybody's good with break even? How about if I ask you how many you have to sell in order to have a pre-tax operating income of $6,000? I would give you credit, except you don't have your name tag out. What is it?
I apologize.
No, it's okay.
I'm on Jameson. I got 24,800.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Ryan, what'd you get?
I got 24,800.
Okay, same thing. All right, break even, right? Just another review here is fixed cost divided by contribution margin per unit. Brianna was really fast with this, which is great, right? So the formulas are super easy. Like I said, they don't even require a thought process unless you forget it, and then you can work your way backwards. So the answer of 20,000 burgers was absolutely right. Your fixed cost divided by contribution margin per unit is 20,000 burgers. All right, and if you're going to do target net operating income given to you at $6,000, all you need to do is add that to your total fixed costs. Right, so in order to get your total margin, it's your fixed plus that target net operating income, and you are now at 24,800 burgers. Okay. Good. Okay. How about one more for the road here? Manzoni Machine Works produces soft serve ice cream freezers. The freezers sell for $18,000 and variable cost total $12,300 per freezer. Manzoni incurs $3.5 million in fixed costs during the year, and the company's tax rate is 25%. How many freezers must Manzoni sell to generate a net income of $7,635,000? Okay, name.
Yeah, sorry, Carlos.
Carlos.
Yeah, I got
2,000, 2,400, 2,042. What did you get, Martina?
I had 2,400.
Okay. Are you kidding me, or no? I'm just.
No.
Okay, let me just make sure I have. Okay, so let's see. So when I'm giving you the net income, what you want to do is use the new, right? So you need to get to operating income. So you're going to take that target net income and you're going to divide it by 1 minus the tax rate, right? So that's going to get you to your net operating income, right? For the people that have their hand up that are trying to participate, if you want, you can chat me your answers, because I don't have a moderator here looking for hands. So you can chat me and put your hands down. Okay. All right, so Sophia and Justin, do you have questions, or are you just, okay, just making sure. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do here to get to 2,400 is to get that net operating income, right? So I'm calculating this first. So what I know is net income divided by 75%, because the tax rate is 25%, is going to get me my net operating income of 10,180,000. So once I have that, I know that I'm going to calculate my total numerator by adding that to my fixed expenses, which are 3.5 million. So my numerator in total is 13,680,000. I'm going to divide that by my contribution margin per unit, which is your selling price minus the variable cost per unit. Okay, so putting it all together, we should have 2,400 freezers. Okay, so Carlos, what did you say you got?
So I did another contribution margin at 6,000.
Yeah, okay, okay, yep. right, so that's fine. I like to hear the incorrect answers and for a different thought process, but if you just typed it in, then that's fine. Okay. All right, everybody feeling good about adjusting these little formulas? Okay. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is my favorite part of this chapter, and that is the what if technique, right? So the whole idea of using this income statement is so that you're able to play around with your ideas to see which one is going to give you the higher net income, right? So that's exactly what we're going to do here. We're going to make all kinds of changes. We have all kinds of ideas. We're going to change our selling price. We're going to change our packaging, our variable costs. We're going to advertise, change our fixed costs. All of those will affect your volume. And then we're going to decide which one is the better idea, will be the one that gives us the highest net income. Okay. All right, so there's 3 approaches here. We're going to start off with the easier one that is going to take the most time, which is going to be, here's your net income under this current situation. If we do these changes, here's your net income, and you can get the difference between the two, and then you will have your correct answer. That's going to take you the most time. And as I said, your exam is time sensitive. And so you really want to pick the way that is going to be the fastest calculation. But as you start, whatever is comfortable for you to really understand what you're doing is the best. And then you can move into the next possible way of calculating this. And this is exactly what we did with our cruise ship. I never calculate sales and variable costs because sales minus variable gives you margin. So you could do 2 incomplete or half income statements. Margin minus fixed compared to margin minus fixed. That will be much less time, but that's still not the best way to do this. The fastest way is just looking at what's relevant here, which would be the difference in margin and the difference in fixed costs, right? So if you think about the difference in margin, margin is going to be affected by selling price, variable costs, and volume. So when you're changing any of those, you know you're going to be changing your margin. And then your fixed expenses might be changing salaries, or advertising is usually the big one. And so you can just look at the change in fixed expenses. And that's going to be your quickest way. And when we get into decision making, that's what you're going to be required to do. So you might as well start to practice this. And like I said, it's going to be your fastest way of calculating your answers. Okay, so here's the problem. We're going to start with the company we're going to try to improve here. Casual Seating Company is currently selling 2,000 oversized beanbag chairs a month at a price of $85 per chair. The variable cost of each chair sold includes $60 to purchase the beanbag chair from the supplier and a $4 sales commission. Fixed costs are $10,000 per month. The company is considering making several operational changes and wants to know how the change will impact its operating income. All right, so the first thing I want to do, and what you should probably want to or know how to do, is tell me what's the net income right now, right? So before we start making improvements, where do we stand with this particular company? So I know I can calculate my margin because the selling price is 85, and I have 2 variable costs here. Cost of goods sold for this merchandising company is 60. And then my sales commission is another variable cost of 4. So my total variable costs are 64. I can get my contribution margin per unit. I am currently selling 2,000 of these beanbag chairs, and my fixed expenses are 10,000. So just putting all of that data into your income statement, you should be able to tell me what the net income looks like right now. So as we go through this, Krill?
Yeah, so I was wondering, when we calculate the net income, is it just by simply we can multiply our total number and the price we get from 85 minus 60 and minus 4, right?
And then subtract out fixed.
By the 10,000, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Did you do it?
Yeah, yeah.
What'd you get?
32,000.
32 is right. So if you're calculating your net income, 32 is right. Right, so what I'm looking at here is all the different alternatives, right? So there we're starting at 32. We have 4 different great ideas here, and we're going to go through them. We're going to look at each one and decide which one works, which one is good, which one is not. So don't worry, you don't have to look at these teeny little letters as we go through. I'm going to put it up again so that we can analyze each situation, right? But before we do that, let's just take a look at how we got that 32 in case you were did not get 32 yourself, right? So what you're going to do is and as you can see, I never calculate sales and variable costs, right? Why would you do that when you can start right at margin? So selling price minus both variable costs gives you a contribution margin of 21, and you are multiplying that by the 2,000 bean bags you are selling and buying. And so you're looking at 42 minus fixed cost, net income of 32. All right. The first scenario, the first great idea that somebody had is that we're going to change the sales commission from $4 to 10% of the selling price. And by paying our salespeople more money, they're going to be excited and they're going to go out and sell more. And you can expect the volume to go up by 15%. All right. So I'm changing 2 things here. I'm changing volume and I'm changing my variable costs. So I know my margin is going to be changing here, right? So instead of $4, I am looking at a 10% of the selling price or $8.50. So I'm bumping up my variable costs from $4 to $8.50. And so my salespeople are going to be all excited. They're going to go out and try to sell more. And so I'm going to bump that volume up by 15%. So I'm going to now be able to sell 2,300 beanbag chairs. Okay. Is this a good idea? Well, it is if it causes our net income to go up, right? So here is the numbers put into play here. So here's your new variable costs. I've taken out the 4 and I put in the 10% or $8.50. So you know when your variable costs go up, your margin is going down. But the volume went up. Is it enough volume to cover that lower contribution margin? And you can see the answer to that is no, right? You would take the 1,650, multiply it by the 2,300 units, and you can see that your margin is now only 37,950 compared to what it was or is now at 42. So your margin is going down by $4,050. You can stop right there. Right? In all of this analysis, nobody changed any of the fixed expenses. They're going to be the same. If you're more comfortable saying subtract out fixed costs and getting net income, this would be like the intermediate step here. You could say the difference in net income, it's going to go down by $4,050. And so the answer is no, we don't like this idea. But as I said, you do not even have to consider fixed costs. They didn't change. Right? So all you have to do, what's going to cause the difference in net income is going to be the change in your margin. Look at your change, any change in margin, any change in fixed expenses. Okay. So this idea, not a great one, but no worries because here's alternative 2. So alternative 2 says, I'm going to spend an extra $5,000 on advertising, and this is going to increase my sales volume by 10%. Right? So I'm changing my volume by 10%, which means my margin is going to change, right? Because contribution margin times volume. And by advertising or increasing my advertising, I'm changing my fixed expenses here as well. Okay. What's the change in your contribution margin? And now the change in your fixed costs, right? So original is 42. Here, your contribution margin per unit didn't change, right? We didn't change anything about selling price or variable cost. The only thing that we changed is that volume went from 2,000 to 2,200. So my margin is going up because of that extra volume, right? And you can see it's going to go up by $4,200. And up here, an even faster way is just saying, I know volume is the only thing that's going to change my margin. So you could say it goes up by $200. I'm going to get, we did this with margin, right? an extra $21 for those extra 200 units. Whether you want to look in total or doing it this way, margin is going to go up by 4,200, but your fixed expenses are going up by 5. So you can see you're not bringing enough margin in to cover those additional fixed costs. And so you're going to see net income go down by $800. Or if you wanted to subtract the two different fixed expenses, you can see that your net income, the difference between the two is 800. Okay, so this one isn't a great idea either, not as bad as the first one. But here's alternative 3. Now we're going to raise our selling price to 100, which will cause the sales volume to drop by 25%. All right, so I know that if I'm changing my selling price, that means my contribution margin per unit is going up, but my volume is going down. So let's see how my final contribution or what my final contribution margin in total is going to look like. And again, do I have any changes in fixed? Nope. So I can just look at the change in contribution margin here and get the same answer. Right, so I know with my selling price going up by $15, my contribution margin per unit is going to go up by $15. And now though, because my volume is dropping by 25%, my volume is only going to be 1,500 units. So that extra contribution margin per unit, that boost from the selling price, is enough here, you can see, to cover the volume drop. So my contribution margin is going up by 12,000. And like I said, if you're more comfortable calculating that net income and double checking, that's fine. But you know, if I made no changes to my fixed cost, the change in your margin is going to be the change in your net income. So this one works. We can expect net income to go up by $12,000. Okay. Are we good? All right, and then the last one, I'm changing everything, right? So I can just picture this on the exam, right? You're looking at me, oh, all these things are changing. So all you have to do, remember, is think, go change by change, think about how each one is going to change your margin and your fixed expenses, right? So here's the last idea. So we're going to buy from a domestic supplier. It's going to cost $12 more per unit. So right now, cost of goods sold is 60. It's going to go up to 72. So we're upping our variable costs. To get the word out that it's now made in the USA, advertising is going to be increased by $3,000, changing our fixed costs by $3,000. And then the selling price is going to go up by 90. All right, so we're going to be changing our contribution margin per unit. We're changing our volume. We're changing our fixed expenses. All right, so here's our original contribution margin. So now you can see increasing the selling price and increasing the variable cost, or that cost of goods sold, is going to still lower that contribution margin per unit, right? Selling price minus all variable to 14 instead of 21. And we're looking at an extra volume here. It's going up, but again, you can see it's not going up enough. So even though you're going to sell 2,300 units, it's only at $14 per unit. Your margin is going to go down by $9,800. Fixed expenses, again, if you want to calculate the two net incomes, that's fine, but you can see the change in your fixed costs for just 3. So not only is your margin going down, but your fixed costs are going up as well. So this idea is not a good idea. Overall, your net income will go down by $12,800. Okay. All right, so the next couple of slides are just a little bit of practice for you because I've been doing a lot of number calculations here, but your exam is not all numbers. There's going to be a lot of theory. In fact, last semester, it was almost mostly theory, right? The idea is numbers take some time, but if I ask something in theory, it's quicker for you to answer, and there's more, more time for you then to move on and get to more questions. So these are just kind of approaches to theory questions. So here I'm going to ask you, instead of calculate break even, if your selling price goes down, what happens to break even? Or if your selling price goes up, or if your variable costs go up or down, or your fixed costs change, right? So if you're like me, I think mathematically, right? So if I'm looking at these theory questions, I think about the equation, fixed cost divided by contribution margin, right? So I know how the cost, how break even will behave if I change my numerator or if I change my denominator, right? Or you can just think about it in terms of making sense. But if you're thinking about that equation, right, that formula, that shortcut formula, if your selling price goes down, that means your contribution margin is going to go down, right? You're going to be bringing in less money. And if your denominator is going down, that means that your break even is going to go up, right? Denominator decreasing means that break even would go up. And it makes sense. If you're bringing in less money, then you're going to have to sell more units just to cover all of your costs. Same thing, just the reverse. If your selling price goes up, now you're bringing in more money, or you can think about it as margin per unit going up, but then your break even would go down. Now you have to sell less units because you're bringing in more money, right? Break even means what you're selling to exactly cover all of your costs. And if you're thinking the same way, variable costs, how do they affect your contribution margin, right? It's just the opposite from sales. If your variable costs go up, that means your margin is going down, which means your break even would go up. You're going to have to sell more units in order to cover all of your costs. And then if your variable costs go down, margin goes up, which means that you sell less units to cover your costs. So just kind of getting you prepared for some of the theory kind of questions that you're definitely going to see. And then the last one, how about fixed costs? What do you think? What happens if fixed costs go up? What happens to break even? Daniel?
Wouldn't it go up? Like you would need more?
Yes, yep. Fixed costs go up, break even would go up. Again, just in theory, if your costs are going up, you're going to have to sell more units. But if you want to think about that mathematically, if you increase your numerator, then you're going to see an increase in your break even. Okay. Okay. All right. So so what we're moving on to now is operating leverage. I'm going to start to cover this, but this can be complex. So I'm going to start it now, so that way you can start to think about it, and then we will start back here on Wednesday. Right. So so you might just want to sit back and think about what operating leverage is, and then we're also moving into risk and cost structure. All right. So operating leverage is going to tell you how responsive a company's operating income is to changes in volume. So we talked about this, it's similar to contribution margin, right? If your sales go up by $1, that does not mean your net income goes up by $1, right? Because your variable costs go right up along with that volume, but your fixed costs don't. So degree of operating leverage is going to do a similar thing like your contribution margin. It's going to tell you how sensitive your net income is going to be in relation to the change in your sales volume. Right, so very similar to what we've already done. And then you're going to see the higher your degree of operating leverage, we're going to move into a riskier structure, riskier situation. Right, degree of operating leverage is calculated by taking contribution margin and divided by your net operating income. So that is how you're going to calculate your operating leverage factor. And it is a factor, a multiplier. So this number is what you're going to multiply by your increase in sales volume. And then that's going to tell you how your net income will go up. Okay. Let's do our factor for universal sports, right? If you take your contribution margin, which is $324,000, and divide by your net income of 84, what you get is 3.857. This is your factor or your multiplier. So what I'm going to tell you in the next slide is I'm expecting my sales volume to go up by 10%. Right? So if I'm expecting my volume to go up by 10%, what you're going to do is you're going to take this factor and multiply it by that 10% increase. And that's going to tell you the increase in your net income. Right? So if you multiply 3.857 times 10%, what you're going to get is 38.57%. So if sales go up 10%, then your net income will go up 38, almost 39%. Okay, so here it is all done out. So here's your factor, and then here's the assumption that sales volume will go up by 10%. So you're going to take that 10%, multiply it, or I should say multiply that factor by 10%, and you're going to get 38.57%. So if your current net income is 84,000, then it's going to go up by 38.57%, or a $32,400 increase. So a 10% in sales volume will give you an increase in net income of $32,400. Or your net income will be $116,400. And you can see here, I just did it out to show you that it really does work, right? A 10% increase in volume. They're currently selling 54,000 jerseys. That would be upping the volume to 59,400 jerseys. Using the same contribution margin per unit, you're seeing your net income at 116,400. Okay, we're going to stop here. So we're going to talk more about this factor, degree of operating leverage, and cost structure. So you can take a look at this, take a look at the chapter if you haven't finished it. We have one more day, and we're going to get into some more mostly theory kinds of things. But take a look and make sure that if there's anything you have questions about, just let me know. All right, I will see you Wednesday.
Thank you. Thank you.
Professor?
Thank you.
On Wednesday, mandatory?
Yes, Wednesday is mandatory. Well, nothing's mandatory, but
It said optional. The TA meeting was optional on the syllabus.
Wednesday is?
That's what it said. It said the TA meeting was optional. I'm just asking because I have a therapy meeting, so I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything.
Yeah, no, it shouldn't. If that's what, I'll double check. It's next Tuesday. I'm gonna have to look. Wednesday is a regular class. Did anybody else see that?
Oh, sorry. I'm thinking about something totally different.
Oh, good. All right, because I'm thinking, what did I do?
So sorry.
Okay.
See you Wednesday, miss.
See you Wednesday.
Professor?
Yeah.
So I was wondering for the wheelie homework, the adaptive practice and then end of a chapter practice, it's not for the grade, it's just for our own practice, right?
For your own pleasure and enjoyment, yes.
And then for the, there's a chapter 1, for example, questions, we have unlimited attempts to answer them, right?
Your homework should be unlimited. It should say chapter 1, 1 point or something like that.
Yeah, and the score will not be reduced if we take more tries to answer it, right?
Yes, but if you're right, but try, like I said, try your best. I wouldn't go in, well, everybody does the homework different. I'd probably pretend that it's an exam and see if see how well you did. But yes, you have unlimited attempts. So if you don't get it right, you can go back and figure it out and then get it and then.
Okay, thank you.
See you later. Thanks.
Have a good one.
Thanks, Professor.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Hello.
Every time I walk in here, I just start sweating.
I know.
All